10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
All right, we're going to move to Chair Fine's portion of the budget having to deal with education. Any questions for Chair Fine? Rep. Geller, you are recognized.
Good morning, Chair Fine.
Morning.
How are you today?
You're recognized.
I'm doing fine. I went and presented a bill in Ways and Means. I thought we'd be done with my questions by the time I got back. So obviously it didn't work out.
Any other questions for Chair Fine?
Yes,
Follow up, Rep. Geller.
Thank you. A worthy effort, Chair Fine, and I'm sorry that didn't quite work out for you. Can we talk a little about this project, this thing that you've put in on putting parents first adjustment, $200 million coming out of 12 particular school districts. Have you considered the particular programs that the administrators that you're targeting? I understand you said it won't go to anybody who works in a school, but my question is, have you considered the particular impact on the programs that would suffer that the administrators that you're targeting work with the school system district-wide in those districts to take care of?
Rep. Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have, and the way we looked at this is by taking a look at administrators largely working in central offices, making more than double the salary of a starting teacher. Now, if we want to have a debate over how many bureaucrats we need making $100,000 or more, while at the same time we say we don't have enough teachers to serve, I'm happy to have that discussion. But to give you just one example, in one of our school districts, we have 45 directors of central services. 45. But apparently they can't get all the work done because they have to have 2 assistant directors. I don't know how they split the work between them. And those assistant directors need 4 coordinators. Again, all making more than $100,000 a year. I would note that in this budget, no school district will receive less money in the future year than they get right now. So the Putting Parents First adjustment is, in the grand scheme of things, compared to the aggregate of the money, a relatively small part, but is intended, again, to reward those school districts that continued to put parents first over the past year.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chair Fine, are you aware that some of the programs, for instance, just in Miami-Dade, that these particular administrators help with and provide district-wide services for include exceptional student education, include cybersecurity, include school police, transportation, safety, mental health, and food and nutrition programs?
Chair Fine, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am. And I would note that we are not requiring the elimination of these positions in this budget. This is how we came up with the number. But I would also note in Miami-Dade County, just for example, there are 3 associate superintendents who focus on instruction and curriculum. That's what they do, 3. But that's not enough to focus on instruction and curriculum. They have 9 assistant area superintendents that also focus on instruction and curriculum, but those 12 people aren't enough, apparently, to focus on instruction and curriculum. They have 35 general directors that work for them that focus on instruction and curriculum. Again, all making more than $100,000 a year in salary alone, twice the minimum salary of a teacher. This does not include benefits. On average, these people make close to $200,000, but lest I forget, those 47 employees can't handle all of the instruction and curriculum bureaucratic needs. They also have, and I don't know how they only have two assistant directors to work for the 35 general directors, 9 assistant superintendents, and 3 associate superintendents, all working on instruction and curriculum.
Follow up, Rep. Geller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have, can you discuss for us what concerns you may have for the constitutionality of this, a move in view of the Florida constitutional requirement for a uniform system of public education?
Chair Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We make many adjustments to the FEFP for all kinds of things, sparsity supplements, DCD. There's all kinds of adjustments. Frankly, I might prefer a world in which school districts, it was very simple, and we made an amount of money per student, and every school district got that, and it was an exactly fair amount of money. That wouldn't be very good, I don't think, for Dade County, but it might be good for other parts of the state. We make adjustments all the time. This would just be one new adjustment. Adjustments are generally considered fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Additional questions for Chair Fine? Representative Driscoll. Oh, Rep. Alexander. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Fine, if we could stay on the putting parents first adjustment, can you speak to the intent in regards to the threshold of salary? Is this intended for just anyone who makes over $100,000 in these specific counties?
You're recognized, Chair Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The way that was done was basically using double the minimum salary. Again, about $50,000 is the minimum salary that we've set for teachers in the state of Florida. Obviously, not everyone's gotten there yet, but that's what we've stated as a goal. These are bureaucrats, not people in the classroom, not people teaching students. These are administrative overhead expenses that are making $100,000 or more. And I would say that there is a reasonable debate to be had, and a fair question to ask me is, why do we even have 1,600 bureaucrats in these 12 districts making $100,000 a year or more in salary plus benefits and everything else? At the same time, we talk legitimately about how we'd actually like to put more money into the classroom. But it was double starting teacher salary.
You're recognized for a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Fine, do you believe that the Florida legislature will be able to function with just the members of the Florida House? And are there any members of the Florida legislature staff that make over $100,000?
Chair Fine, you are recognized.
Sure, it's not really the subject of the bill, of the budget.
Mr. Follow-up.
Let's keep it to the subject of the bill.
I mean, well, Mr. Chairman, the premise behind what he's saying is that people within the school system are able to function every aspect of the school system under a certain threshold. And so I do believe that it is relevant because I'm trying to get a better understanding of the intent and the maybe potential unintended consequences of us not having those critical services.
So we can explore the unintended consequences within the education silo, but I don't know how the employment of staff in the legislature overlays with that. So let's stick to education. You're recognized.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Fine, if you could speak to, is there any intended proviso language in regards to specifically giving clear information or definition how these funds should be allocated? So, for example, if it was a situation where these employees all had new contracts established where they made $99,999, or is this intended to completely eliminate those individuals from the school system?
Chair Fine, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Line 86 of proviso specifically states that this money cannot come out of programs in schools that would affect students. That said, I want to be clear again, I've answered this once before. We are not eliminating positions. We don't decide what the structure of a school district should be, how many bureaucrats they have, this and that, the other thing. That is something that they do on their own. But as a vehicle to fund this putting parents first adjustment to the overwhelming majority of school districts, again, 55 who stood with parents, who understood the law, who followed the law, we felt this was a good way to come up with a funding mechanism. Again, this is a net zero cost to the state, where 55 school districts will be getting this $200 million.
Last question.
Last question. You're recognized.
And thank you for indulging me, and I do appreciate Chairman Fine's responses. So just to get the final clarification in regards to the matter at hand, Chairman Fine, what you're saying is that these positions would not be eliminated. However, there are additional funds that are being allocated through the GAA that will produce a net zero, and that the local school systems will have the autonomy and the authority to make determinations of how to allocate those funds. Is that what you're suggesting?
Chair Fine, you're recognized to clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The adjustment is an amount of money that the school districts will be able to determine how to do, subject to the requirement that it not affect in-school programs. But there's lots of things. So, for example, one of the issues of the last year, and I'm still getting the number, but between the state and these local school boards, we spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars litigating over what the law is. That was all money that we appropriated that then got used to sue us over laws that we had passed. They could probably save some money on legal fees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Driscoll, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Chair Fine, to be clear, the Putting Parents First adjustments were intended to be punitive to the school districts that receive those deductions?
Chair Fine, you're recognized.
I wouldn't categorize it that way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wouldn't categorize it that way, but I would categorize it this, and I think it's an important thing that I've come to realize over the last 12 months. You know, we have two powers here in the legislature. We actually think we're fairly important, but we're really not. There's really two things that we do. One I'll call the power of paper. So I have 19 of these things sitting on my wall in my office. They are bills that I have passed, and all they are words on paper. But once they're passed, we in the legislature do not have the ability. We count on people to actually follow those words that are on paper. We count on others to enforce them. We count on others to interpret them. We count on others to hold people accountable. We don't have that power. We have the power to create paper. And as we saw over the last year, 55 of our school districts followed the words that were on the papers that we wrote, and 12 did not. But we have one other power as well. It's the only other power that we have. In addition to this power of paper, it's called the power of the purse. We get to decide how much money that folks have to do certain things. And whether people like it or not, they can't make up more of it. And so this is the only vehicle that we as a legislature have in area, whether it's education or otherwise, to hold folks accountable for following the policy decisions that we here have made. I don't think it's punitive. I think it's holding people accountable, and I think it is saying that we expect the laws that we pass to be followed by all of our school districts.
Representative Driscoll for a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Fine, you talked a lot about these schools having bureaucrats, these school districts having bureaucrats, and I just want to understand your definition of a bureaucrat. And I guess I ask, you know, I heard Rep. Alexander's line of questioning, and I was thinking along the same lines. So but maybe you could explain for us the term bureaucrat as you use it, because it sounds to me like you're using it in a negative context, but I want to be sure that I understand and that we're talking apples to apples.
Chair Fine, maybe it makes sense for you to define what these positions are to help clarify for Representative Driscoll.
Mr. Chair, that's not the question. I heard Chair Fine talk about area superintendents, et cetera, but he referred to them as bureaucrats in a way that to me sounded derisive.
Okay,
And
Chair Fine, perhaps define the term bureaucrat, and then through that, the job descriptions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, if you choose to say that the term bureaucrat is used in a derisive manner, that's certainly your right to have that interpretation. I'm not doing that. I mean, bureaucrat has a definition. I just sort of looked it up here. It's an official in a government department, and particularly one who's perceived as being concerned with procedural correctness at the expense of people's needs. Sorry, I didn't actually intend. That's the first thing that came up in Google, so I wasn't. That's actually quite derisive. But I did this. I did this on the fly. So maybe Google's not as liberal as we think. But no, I mean, the definition of a bureaucrat is someone who is and I could have called them administrators. These are folks who are not in the classroom, who are not teaching, who are not like my mother who taught 8th grade science in a government-run school. So we're talking about, and we're generally talking about people who are not only administrating, but they are administrating in a central office far removed from students and from schools. They are not the folks that are making sure our students get an education. And I gave you a couple of examples. I'll give you another one just because I find it, you know, I found this one just so amusing. You know, we've got one district that's got a supervisor of textbooks in addition to all the curriculum. They apparently have to pay someone $118,000 a year to, I guess, keep track of all the books. I mean, they're supervisor of textbooks. They're not even a director of textbooks or an assistant superintendent of textbooks. We have in these central offices, and frankly, this is probably a problem in government overall, a lot of people who aren't directly focused on providing the services to the children that we need, that are again, in bureaucratic roles. And as we look to put parents first, this $200 million will be given to these 55 school districts to continue to build on the great policies and procedures they have done over the last year of putting parents and putting teachers first. And we hope that over the next year, these other school districts will do a little bit of a turnabout and join them in doing so as well.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But Chair Fine, what about the students? What about the students in these school districts who weren't the ones making decisions, but surely will bear the consequences of this reduced funding?
Chair Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do this for them. It is the students who suffered under the illegal policies that these school districts put in practice over the last 12 months. And we do this for them to make sure that it doesn't happen again. I have two little boys. They're not so little anymore. They'd be angry. One's 10 and one will be 14 next month. And I've learned that when they do things that they shouldn't do, if there is no consequence for doing it, not only will that behavior continue, but it will worsen. And so this, in the grand scheme of things, is not an earth-shattering number. Again, every school district in the state of Florida, including these 12, gets more money in this GAA than they do right now. Every single one. But this is intended to say, when we put out that piece of paper, we intend it to be followed. And if it's not, we'll use the power of the purse to make sure it is next time.
Representative Driscoll for hopefully a last follow-up.
I can't guarantee that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we'll work on it. You
All right.
recognize.
So, because I want to make sure that I understand, Chair Fine, you were saying that every school district will receive more in the GA under this budget. So, for example, Hillsborough County, where I'm from and represent, I see a 14.19 million adjustment under putting parents first. Are you saying that Hillsborough County will be made whole on the back end and they won't suffer a net $14.19 million reduction overall?
Chair Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To talk about Hillsborough County in particular, under the GAA, inclusive of the Putting Parents First adjustment, Hillsborough County would receive a 5.76% increase in funding from the third calc to the budget as we've proposed, equal to an increase of almost $99 million.
Okay, turns out that was my last question, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Additional questions? Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chair Fine, listen, I appreciate a lot of things that are on and in your budget. Increase in student allocations, teacher salary increases, although I get concerned about compression. But, things that to expound on what Representative Driscoll was just talking about. First of all, the counties that you're talking about here are certainly not any partisan counties. So we're hurting nonpartisan counties across the state in our school boards. But, getting to my question, you talk about how and what these bureaucrats make. Dade County's at 3rd, Broward County's, I think, at 5th, Orange County's at 6th, Palm Beach County's at 10th. In the nation, in the size districts, the single largest employer in Palm Beach County is our school district. Yet Palm Beach County is set to lose, in your prediction, I believe, let me grab my number right here, I'm sorry, I think it's $23.8 million. Now, you said that can't touch a student. Are you suggesting that we would either cut the salaries of all of our bureaucrats, lay them off? Again, I need an idea where you want that money to come from. You mentioned the idea of litigation. Litigation money is spent and gone. Okay, all those other things. This is an engine of people it takes to run the entire car. Not just the battery, not just the carburetor, not just the tailpipes. Tell me where this money is going to come from in these counties, these 12 counties that you're talking about, please.
Chair Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to talk about Palm Beach County would have a $23.5 million adjustment under the Putting Parents First adjustment that, again, goes to 55 other counties. But net, in the budget that we're proposing today, even after that, we're proposing a 4.1% increase in the overall K-12 funding for Palm Beach County, equal to a $64 million increase. So sorry for them, the money doesn't go up as much, but it still does go up. And while there was a reference to partisan counties and the kind of counties they are and the makeup of that, I want to be clear, one of these 12 is my own county, the county that I represent. So I'm not proposing to do anything to other counties that I am not willing to do to my own. My county will also bear the brunt of this adjustment as well for similarly not following the law.
Follow, Mr. Chair.
Follow up.
In your last statement of them following the law, listen, I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to practice as one, but I believe, as you say, following the law, there's remedies for people to follow the law or not follow the law, and that's through legal proceedings, and I think some of that was already all done. So how can you say, if you say follow the law, if those proceedings are happening and are done and has gone through this, how is this not punitive to those 12 counties that have sought remedies through this process and through this time, that not giving these 12 counties and those cutting those students, it is about the students, because those people that are behind the students have to support them, whether it be support staff, bus drivers, all those other things. How is this not punitive to those 12 counties or the parents of those 12 counties that you want to talk about parents, putting parents first?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. The folks that had punitive actions taken against them over the last 12 months were the students that were in these school districts. Frankly, I think Representative Wilhite of the student in your county that was prevented from going to school for months because she wouldn't follow the mandate. I think of the student in my district, and I've told this story. I don't know if I've told it in here. I may have. But I think of the little girl who's 7 years old, Down syndrome, nonverbal, oversized tongue, who without her parents' knowledge or consent, without her doctor's knowledge or consent, our school district in the county that I represent tied a mask around her face with a nylon rope for 6 weeks. And the parents only found out about it one day when the school district forgot to take the mask off so that the parents wouldn't find out. She got off the bus, and that's how the parents found out about it. That girl is suffering consequences. I think about the little kids who have not been able to develop. 90% of communication is not the words that you say, it's looking at people's faces. I think of all the kids like that have suffered. I think of all the extracurriculars that were affected by these mandates. And frankly, I think about my own son who goes to a government-run school, who had to wear a mask, even though he had, frankly, a doctor's note. But we made the decision that because he was my son, he didn't want to be a soldier in the fight over it, and so he would just go along with it. I got to live this through his eyes. Those were the people who were punitive. I'm here to fight for parents. I'm here to fight for students. Frankly, I'm not here to fight for bureaucrats.
Follow, Mr. Chair.
Follow up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you call me. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Chair Fine. I appreciate that. And again, I'm not here to fight for them. I'm here to support them, because I think it takes, as I said, an entire system and a car to run the car to get down the road. And I guess what I would say to your response is, you talked about those papers on the wall, and we are here to set policy and to allocate funds. But I don't know that we're really allocating all those funds back to them. I would disagree with you that, that we, kids maybe have suffered as well. As you and I have talked about it, my kids prospered to some extent because we offered opportunities for kids to not be in bricks and mortar, but to do virtual, to do other things. And as you mentioned, the little girl in your district, and listen, I feel for that family or that child, but that's even in litigation. So they're seeking remedy as well. And so did these school districts. So as that ongoing litigation happens, a lot of this has been remedied. So again, if we're here to allocate funds, not the papers, but to allocate state funds back to our school districts, I feel like in what's happening here to 4 of our largest school districts in the entire nation, we are not properly doing our job by not allocating funds back to those, because they are, again, I think, for instance, in Orange County, they may be the single largest employer outside of Walt Disney World. Again, as I said, Palm Beach County.
Do we got a question in there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I believe, as I said, Palm Beach County, they're the largest employer. How are we properly doing our budget and our secondary job by not equally giving the money back to every school district for every child in this state to help them prosper and move forward?
Representative Fine, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. There's a number of interesting comments there. How do we not give the money back to every school district equally? We don't do that today. We didn't do it last year. We haven't done it for any of the time that we're here. And by the way, if this is something we want to discuss, getting rid of the FEFP altogether and saying, let's come up with a dollar amount for every child, and it doesn't matter where you go to school, what county you go to, what method you go to, that exact dollar amount goes with you. The budget would be very easy. We would take that dollar amount and we would multiply it by the number of students, and we probably would put in one change, because a child with special needs should not get the same amount of money as a child without special needs. They should get a lot more. But beyond that, we could just do that. That's not what we do. We don't give everyone the same thing today. You talked about remedy. They may have remedies, but those remedies take time. But we as a legislature only have one remedy. We only have one vehicle we can use to create accountability for the things that we do and the policies that we pass. It is an appropriate use of the power of the purse to move forward on those remedies. We are acting exactly the way that we should be by doing this. And the last thing is, so if we get beyond the histrionics and we focus, for example, on Palm Beach will have 1.29% more students in this budget than they have right now. So let's just say about 1%. But even with the Putting Parents First adjustment, they're going to have 4% more funding. So they're going to have more funding per student. They're going to have more funding overall. So I think this is a way to send a message, and an important message. But make no mistake, in a budget for education that exceeds $20 billion between state and local funds, we're talking about $200 million to reward 55 school districts that did the right thing and send a message to 12 that you hurt your children. Don't do it again. Follow the piece of papers that we pass out of this legislature.
Just a point of clarification on my part. I'm sorry, I said equally and I meant proportionally. There, Chair Fine.
Thank you for the clarification. Representative Duran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative, I wanted to ask you about this because, and you just brought this concept, to keep bringing it up, of following the paper. And from my understanding, with these particular districts that you've identified, you know, the school boards who ultimately put together these choices, they're also constitutional officers like you and I are. And I'm concerned what you're saying is, if you don't follow the paper, I'm going to see if maybe you can elaborate a bit on this, that unless you follow the paper, and you should not have a idea or a concept or a opinion as to whether or not your interpretation of the paper is correct or not, that if you even think outside the lines of what I believe is the right lines of the paper, you will be punished. Is that sort of what your intent is behind this?
I don't believe we've gotten anywhere close to that. You want to try and rephrase it?
Sure. You started, a crux of what you have decided to is the reason for this proposal here, the Putting Parents First adjustment. You said it is because certain districts followed the paper, meaning that there was a law that you believe was necessary to be followed, and those who are not receiving this were apparently not following the paper. So I guess my question is, by saying this, these are also constitutional officers who also have to interpret the paper. They may find and believe that what you're saying, the paper, may not necessarily be true, correct, and legal. And for them moving forward and having that sort of opinion, they are being slapped on the hands financially because of that. And I think, is that the intent? Or are you concerned that what you are beginning to do with this is say, do not have an opinion as to what the legality of that paper is. Just follow it as we say, how I believe it is. Are you not concerned that what you're doing here is putting forward that kind of proposal?
Representative Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's a broad philosophical statement here, but I would answer it this way. I am very troubled, not just here, but in this country, how over the last 20 years, people no longer think they have to follow laws that they don't agree with. And by the way, I don't like it when Democrats do it, and I don't like it when Republicans do it. When you do that, you no longer have a democracy. What you have is anarchy. And so whether I like the laws we pass or I don't, and by the way, there's plenty of stuff in Washington, D.C. I don't like, but I'm an American. I got to follow them. And so what my opinion of the law is doesn't matter. I mean, I can try to change it, but I have to follow it. And in 12 of our school districts, they did not. And children suffered as a consequence. And so what we are saying here is we're using the power of the purse, which we have every right to do, and I would argue it is our responsibility to do, in order to say when we pass laws, we expect them to be followed.
Representative Alexander, one quick question I was promised.
Yeah, I'll be real quick, and I won't jump down a rabbit hole. But just to be clear on the clarification, Chairman Fine, are the percentage enhancements across the board, and particularly to these adjustment counties, are they restricted funds?
You recognize, Chair Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that question, Representative Alexander. I think the question really is sort of how did you allocate the funds out to the 55 counties? And we did that on an FTE basis to sort of distribute it that way. It wasn't a random amount, and it's 1 year, and they are unrestricted.
Sorry. So the 55 counties, does that include the other counties that are receiving the deductions? Do they have any restrictions?
You recognize.
To their percentage increase? I know you spoke about the 4.1 for Palm Beach County.
Am I right, Mr. Vice Chair?
You're recognized.
Sorry, I'm moving papers around. So for example, I'll just pick a county here at random. It's the first one. So Baker County, for example, under the Putting Parents First adjustment, will be getting $761,203. That is predicated based on the FTE count that they have in their county. And so every county is different based on that of those 55. And so every one of these 55 counties is getting a different amount, largely determined by the size of their school district.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, but Baker's not in the first adjustment deduction. I'm speaking to, well, first I'm going to be recognized. I'm going to be.
You're recognized.
Yeah, I'm speaking like Alachua County.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Brevard, Broward, Dade, all the counties.
Chair Fine, if you want to clarify for those counties, we'll try one more time.
Sure. As I said again, what we did is we looked at administrative salaries over $100,000 in those counties, and that is how we determined the allocation of the contribution to the 55 counties that will be receiving the Putting Parents First adjustment.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you know, and I'm not.
Rep. Alexander, maybe it makes sense for you and Chair Fine to get together for clarification.
Right, and you know, I'm not this is not my style. So what I'm trying to get understanding is, we spoke about the fact that there will be deductions through the first adjustment determination, the 200 million, specifically to those counties. We're also acknowledging that they will be receiving a percentage increase in their actual allocations per student. What I'm asking is, are those particular dollars for those specific counties, are those funds restricted in any way?
Chair Fine, can you specifically answer that question?
I think I understand the question. So I've talked about increases in counties overall, despite the Putting Parents First categorical. Those numbers are numbers. But we have an FEFP, and that's where largely we fund our education program. And that's going from our total funding, including the student reserve, from $22.9 to $24 billion. And it's got not only the base student allocation, but all of these categoricals. For example, the one that I talked about relating to teacher salary increase, where we're going from $550 million to $800 million. That, when I talk about the total funding that is going to the school district, it includes all of that. Some of that money, most of that money is unrestricted. Some of that money is restricted. For example, we require that teacher salary increase allocated to be spent on teachers. So the categorical money is restricted, but what I was sharing was the total amount of money that the school districts will be getting as an increase. Most of that is unrestricted because most of the money that we give out is unrestricted. Answers the question.
All right. Representative Driscoll, you're recognized.
I know, Chair, I saw that look, but it's a lot of money we're talking
Big budget,
here.
a lot of other silos to get to. So
I know.
One quick follow-up.
I'll try to be quick. Because going back to the Putting Parents First adjustment, you know, I know that's where a lot of our questions have come from, and I have a couple additional. But you talked about following the paper and following the laws that we put into place, but were these the laws prior to our special session where we put these laws in place?
Representative Fine, if you can speak to what the law was before special session.
Sure, not particularly the subject of the bill, but the way our system works is we passed a bill, a Parents' Bill of Rights bill. The governor, as is his role, to interpret and implement the laws, made a statement about how things were done. School districts litigated against them, and other than about a 72-hour period, over the entirety of that time, courts ruled that the governor was correct and that the law was not followed.
Follow up.
The Florida Constitution charges us with providing a uniform system of free public schools that are adequately funded. How is the Parents' First Adjustment contributing to that constitutional
Representative Driscoll, I think that was asked and answered earlier, so if you want to expand upon that, let's do that offline if you have another question. That was asked by another member.
Maybe I'll ask it this way. Don't the other school districts who are not included in the Parents' First Adjustment have the sort of employees that Chair Fine referred to as bureaucrats?
Chair Fine?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm not sure I understand the question, but I would answer it this way. We have certain programs and categoricals that not all school districts share in equally. We have the sparsity supplement to handle the smaller school districts. We have the military, the federally connected student supplement that focuses on military school districts. We do lots of things where not all school districts and not all schools are treated the same. Again, if this is a discussion we want to have as a legislature to junk this whole thing, and say, hey, we're going to give $8,000 or $10,000 or $11,000 per student with some sort of increase, multiply by 1.5 or 2 if you've got special needs, and we're just going to send a check for that amount to wherever the kid goes to school. I'm all in for that. That's not what this budget does. But the notion that every aspect of our budget is equal from a mathematical perspective by student or by district or by school, that has never been the case, at least in the 40 years since the FEFP was designed.
All right, members, I think we're going to move on here to Chair Williams on the infrastructure and tourism portion of the bill. Any members have any questions for Chair Williamson? Representative Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's Chair Williamson, good morning. It's good to see you. I had questions about the affordable housing part of the budget. I think that's your silo. Is that correct?
Representative Williamson?
Correct. Okay. And Mr. Chairman, I'm just asking these questions because obviously St. Petersburg, these are the questions that are in my email inbox. But could you just summarize for me, kind of big picture, the differences between the House position and the Senate position on